Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bali. Ladies and gentlemen, this training is held to promote corporate sustainability disclosure as a priority recommendation on the roadmap for ASEAN sustainable capital markets. It is a platform of collaboration between ASEAN Capital Market Forum and the International Sustainability Standard Boards to disseminate and build capacity on the ISSB standards amongst the ASEAN regulators, corporates, investor communities, and other stakeholders. It is an honor for me to introduce and also greet Head of Delegates Monetary Authority of Singapore, Ms. Abigail. Welcome again. Okay. And also all the speakers, Jonathan Bravo, Jonathan Lebre, and Charlotte Molloy. Welcome again. And of course, all of you participants in both in person and in virtual, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Before starting the training event, it is an honor for me to invite Executive Director, Market Policy and Infrastructure Department at Monetary Authority of Singapore to deliver the welcome remarks. Please welcome Ms. Abigail.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. And very pleased to see everyone coming this afternoon to join us today at the ACMF-ISSB Technical Training. Very much thanks to the Ojaka for the very hospitable arrangements. And thank you to all the corporates as well for taking time to come all the way to beautiful Bali. And as our incomparable MC always says, hope you have some time to enjoy the island as well. Very pleased today to see representatives from a wide variety of companies and also those joining us online from the entire ASEAN region. I also see some familiar faces from the first training session that we held in Singapore in June. Just to give a little bit of background, this is the second dedicated training session that we are holding for corporates on the ISSB standards since the standards were launched just in June 2023. But I also want to say that this is definitely not going to be the last in our series. Both the ACMF and ISSB consider capacity building on the standards to be critical in supporting corporates in the region in your sustainably reporting journey and in adoption of the standards. As some of you may have heard already at the panel discussion yesterday, the ISSB standards are intended as a common language for disclosing the effects of sustainability-related risk and opportunities on your company's prospects. Why do we need this? This is to improve the consistency and comparability of sustainability disclosures in order to support investors' decision-making. So from a company's perspective, or from your perspective, the ability to attract capital and remain in global supply chains, which actually may increasingly require ISSB-aligned sustainability disclosures, is something of existential importance to companies, especially in the ASEAN region. Apart from that, sustainability disclosures are also going to be able to act as a diagnostic tools for your companies to assess and improve your sustainability practices over time. And ultimately, this is going to have a positive impact on your bottom line. This is why we are also very happy to have established a collaboration platform with the ISSB, which will be delivering capacity building for ASEAN stakeholders as a key priority. Yesterday, at the panel, We also heard the perspectives from an Indonesian corporate on how companies can use the standards to guide implementation for better sustainability practices in your operations. And then, as Pak Ahmad said, communication is key to your stakeholders and your shareholders. We also heard about the potential challenges in the implementation of the standards. And these challenges may vary depending on where your company is along the sustainability journey. For companies who are just starting the journey, it may perhaps at this point feel a bit overwhelming, not knowing where to start. But as I shared in my own personal journey and experience as well, don't let us have the perfect be the enemy for the good. It is more important to get started. Take baby steps, and then we can learn by experience together. For those companies that may be a little bit more advanced in your sustainability reporting journey, the challenge may be a bit different. It could be how you shift your existing experience and resources to leverage your knowledge in sustainability reporting that you already have. Many companies I know in ASEAN are already doing reporting, perhaps on frameworks such as the TCFD or GRI. And this will stand you in good stead as a bridge towards ISSB aligned disclosures. So building upon this, in today's workshop, very happy to the ISSB team here to take a closer look at the ISSB standards and where the practical aspects of implementation may look like. We will be sharing and considering some potential tools and solutions that companies like yourselves may choose to use to get started on ISSB aligned reporting. Another thing to note, I do hope everybody will feel open to share. This is a safe space. We're all learning together. So I encourage everyone to share freely, ask questions, and we can make this journey a better one for all of us. To give a little spoiler, we will also be examining some TCFD disclosures and see how to transition them towards becoming ISSB aligned disclosures, which I think some companies here may find very useful. This is going to provide some hands-on and aid understanding concepts that might apply in your industry or your sector. I hope you find this training useful, and we will definitely welcome your feedback as well at the end of the session to help ACMF and ISSB better tailor upcoming sessions, which we hope to do around ASEAN in the coming years. Now let me welcome the ISSB experts to take this session over, and we have with us today the very capable Jarlath. Over to you, Jarlath. Thank you, and I wish everybody a very fruitful learning session.
Thank you, Ms. Abigail, for the welcome remarks. Moving on the main agenda of training today, I'll hand it over to Jarlath Molloy from ISSB. Over to you, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being with us here today. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of the team. I'd like to thank our hosts for a fantastic venue, great location, and for a brilliant service over the last couple of days. It's been really interesting listening to the discussions over the last couple of days. So today we're here to hear a little bit more about the standards. We will be going into the detail. We're not going to help you write your own disclosure standards today, I think, to manage your expectations, but we're going to use some examples. We're going to have some interactive activities, and there'll be plenty of time for questions and answers, hopefully, as well. Next slide, please. This afternoon, we're joined by colleagues. Mr. Bing Leng is a board member with the ISSB, Jonathan Bravo is Director of Regulatory Affairs, and Jonathan Lebray is Chief Connectivity and Integrated Reporting Officer. And they're with us here at the front. And I'll be calling on them to help out during the session. I myself, I'm a former preparer by background, joined the foundation earlier this year. I'm familiar with holding the pen on disclosures. I'm familiar with the internal negotiation that goes on in a large company throughout its annual disclosure cycle. So I feel the frustration and I feel the pain that many of you go through on an annual cycle, and hopefully we can try and address some of those concerns here today. Next slide, please. We'll start with a brief introduction to the foundation, just to make sure everybody knows what it's all about. We'll talk then about key aspects of the two sustainability disclosure standards. I'll talk a little bit later on about the capacity building program that we're here today for. And we're going to have a little bit of fun, hopefully with your support and through a couple of activities. Next slide, please. So normally at the start of a session like this, the moderator will ask everybody to turn their phones off and put them away in their pocket or their bag. But actually, I'm going to ask you to do the opposite. I'd like you to take your phone out, and the colleagues are just putting getting the slides ready. And I'll get out of the way, and I'd like you to try and snap the QR code. I'll give you a minute. And then we can flip to the Slido. So with this platform, it allows us to gather feedback and get some views and opinions from everybody here today in the room and online. And we'll start with asking what your job title is. The bigger the word or the title, it means the more people who have it. So we have quite a few corporate secretaries. Oh. I'll give it another minute. I know some people are still getting on. Okay. So we have quite a number of people with a finance background or a corporate governance background. Number of sustainability related roles. Great. Okay, it's quite a mix. Thank you. Next, where are you joining us from? Which ASEAN country are you joining us from? Give it a minute. Okay, so lots of people from Indonesia. Thank you. Next question. How would you describe your knowledge of sustainability related standards? Don't worry, if you're an expert, I won't know who it is. I'm not going to ask you any questions. Okay, thank you. And how would you describe your knowledge of TCFD? Perhaps some of you have disclosed in accordance with TCFD over the last few years. Perhaps some of you are been watching the development of TCFD over the last few years, and you're familiar with it, but you may not have disclosed as you're not a preparer. Or perhaps you know nothing about TCFD at all. Okay, great. And finally, and I'll leave this open, if you have questions, either in the room or virtually, please use this function to ask your questions. And we'll try and answer as many as we can towards the end. This also allows us to gather all of the questions, and we do collect them all from all of our events. And we're currently preparing a bank of answers to help people. So if you don't want to ask your question, that's fine. Drop it in the poll. We'll capture it. And if we don't answer it today, please know that we are working on a set of answers for the most frequently asked questions. Thank you. If we could flip back to the presentation. Where to start? Okay, next slide, please. So we'll start, I'll start today just providing a little bit of background on the foundation. The IFRS Foundation is a non-governmental organization set up to work in the public interest. The foundation has a three-tier governance model. Capital market authorities and regulators sit on the monitoring board and are responsible for overall governance and oversight of the activities of the foundation. We have a set of trustees who are responsible for strategy and oversight of the standard setting process. And then we have two standard setting boards. The Accounting Standards Board was founded in 2001, and the Sustainability Standards Board was founded in 2021. It's a 20-year gap. But interestingly, they're both set up to solve problems, which aren't that different. The boards are independent, but they're complementary to provide information to investors and other providers of capital. That's their purpose. Next slide, please. And as I said, the boards were set up in both cases in response to strong market demand. With the ISSB in particular, investors, companies, policymakers, we're all asking for three things: decision useful comparable information, particularly for investors; to end the alphabet soup of voluntary reporting standards; and to provide an efficient reporting landscape. The ISSB has the same transparent, rigorous due process that its sister board, the International Accounting Standards Board, has employed for the last 20 years. Next slide, please. But the ISSB has not reinvented the wheel. It is building on significant experience arising from the organizations that consolidated in at the time of its founding, including the Integrated Reporting Council, the SASB Standards, the Climate Disclosure Standards Board, and many of you will have seen the announcements over the last few weeks and months on TCFD, and announcing its work effectively was completed, and it would transfer monitoring activities to the foundation. Next slide, please. Since the standards launched in the summer, we've been very busy. We've been working with stakeholders around the world, including with IOSCO, and many of you may have seen their endorsement of our standards, which followed shortly after they were published. In addition, we're working with audit and assurance stakeholders to enhance standards around assurance. I'll come back to this a little bit later. We're working with regulators and policymakers all around the world, many of whom are in the room or have been in the room for the last couple of days, as well as many others, helping them understand what the adoption steps might be. And in addition, we're also talking to market participants, companies right around the world who are interested, who are willing, and who are able to begin voluntarily reporting or disclosing against our standards from next year. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. So before we get into the details on the first standard, S1, let's remind ourselves for a moment why these standards are important. These matters are important to investors because a company's ability to generate cash flow is linked to the interactions between the company and its stakeholders, and society, and the economy, and the natural environment throughout its value chain. Together, the company and the resources and relationships that it has form a system in which it operates. And these dependencies and impacts connect to the resources and relationships that it relies upon, and in turn create. The first disclosure standard, S1, builds on the concepts of the integrated reporting framework, which helps companies articulate how they rely on, how they use, and how they affect different types of resources and relationships to create, to preserve, and sometimes to erode value for investors over time. Next slide, please. These resources and relationships, they take different forms. They can be internal, they can be external, they can be upstream, they can be downstream. And they all affect the value a company creates, preserves, or erodes. Next slide, please. So we'll start with a quick summary of the key concepts and the requirements within S1. And as you can see on the slides, S1 asks for disclosure of material information, we'll come back to this, about sustainability-related risks and opportunities to meet investor information needs. The standards, as many of you will know already, applies the TCFD architecture. It requires industry-specific disclosures for matters other than for climate change. So for everything else beyond climate change, it refers to sources of guidance to help companies identify sustainability risks and opportunities. And it can be used with any accounting system. It's agnostic when it comes to accounting systems. Next slide, please. Thank you. So there are 6 sections of the standards. And unfortunately, we're going to run through all 6, which might be a little bit easier than opening the document itself or reading through it. So what I'm going to do is just present highlights, a quick summary of the detail, and there is lots more detail in the standards. So the first one is the overall objective. Secondly, we get to the scope of the standards. The third one is the conceptual foundations of this type of information, which includes requirements on materiality and connected information. The fourth one is about core content. So these are the key disclosure requirements relating to governance, strategy, risk, metrics, and targets. Number 5 then are the general requirements, and we'll touch on this a little bit. It talks about the location of the disclosures, the timing of the reporting, and a statement of conformance. And then finally, the last element are requirements relating to judgments, uncertainties, and errors. Next slide, please. So in terms of the objective, S1 sets out the overarching requirement for a company to disclose information about its sustainability risks and opportunities to meet the market needs. And when we talk about sustainability-related risks and opportunities, we're not talking about every single potential risk or opportunity. We're only talking about the ones that are most material that could affect investor decision-making. And they would be principally, or they would be expected to affect the company's cash flow, its access to finance, or the cost of capital over the short, the medium, and the long term. Next slide, please. The scope, as I mentioned, of S1 includes all potential sustainability-related risks and opportunities. S2 focuses on climate, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. Next slide, please. So S1 sets out a number of conceptual foundations. The first one is fair representation. The fair representation requirement builds on the IFRS accounting standards. And that sets out basically that the disclosures should be faithfully represented. And what I mean is the information disclosed should be complete. It should be neutral. And it should be an accurate description of that information. Next slide, please. The definition of material information used in the sustainability standards is the same definition that's used in the accounting standards. And this is that information is material if omitting it, if misstating it, if obscuring it, could reasonably be expected to influence an investor decision. It's the same definition used in the accounting standards and has been in place for over 20 years. S1 requires a company to provide information that enables investors to understand the connectivity of the information that they disclose. And there's three elements to this. The first one is the connections between the individual sustainability risks and opportunities. The second one is the connectivity between the financial disclosures, between the sustainability-related financial disclosures, i.e. the connections between governance, strategy, risk, and metrics and targets. And the third element is the connectivity between the sustainability disclosures and the rest of the annual report, including the financial statements. Now, as a result, the requirements of S1 state that this information should be prepared for the same reporting entity, as you might expect. It should be provided at the same time as the financial statements. Again, it's no surprise. And as part of the general purpose financial reports. It should include the data and the assumptions used to parallel or supplement the same data and assumptions used for financial statements. To the extent possible. And we'll come back to that a little bit later. Next slide, please. S1 requires companies to identify how sustainability risks and opportunities have affected its current financial position or financial performance or cash flows in the reporting period. As for example, a company might disclose how an asset impairment was affected by its strategy for managing a risk in its annual report. A company is also expected to explain the anticipated effects of these risks and opportunities to its financial position and performance. We'll come back to some examples a little bit later, and I'll help bring this to life a little bit. But current and anticipated effects relate to the company's existing strategy and balance sheet, not any future potential changes to its current activity or balance sheet or operations. And that's really important. Company is required to disclose both quantitative and qualitative information. And S1 and S2 set out these criteria, and there's some reliefs which operate and apply, and we'll come back to this a little bit later. Next slide, please. During the consultation on the exposure drafts for S1 and S2, some stakeholders raised concerns. They said that companies could find it difficult to measure and to disclose information about anticipated financial effects. And it's a fair concern to have. So as a result, in preparing the disclosures, a company is required to use all reasonable and supportable information that's available to it at that time, but without undue cost or effort. And you'll see that phrase time and time again through the standards. Nobody is expecting perfection in year one. Like anything new, we all try. It takes some practice, and this is no different. And the release that we'll talk about augment this. We don't expect perfection in year one. We're all on a journey. However, over time, it's expected that companies with limited skills or capabilities will pick that experience up. Those skills will improve. Those capabilities will improve through a process of evolution and learning, and as a result, the disclosures will improve. Next slide, please. So building on the TCFD framework, S1 requires the following information on the core content areas. And anyone who's familiar with TCFD will recognize these 4 areas. The first one is governance, so information that enables investors to understand governance processes, governance controls, procedures, and so on that the company uses to monitor and to manage and to oversee risks and opportunities. The second one is strategy, and this is sometimes a little bit harder. Information that enables investors to understand a company's strategy for managing sustainability-related risks and opportunities. Now, it sounds relatively straightforward. But for any of you who've got a risk management system in your own company, ask yourself a question: how integrated are these issues in your risk management system? And as a result, how does your strategy respond to it? On risk management, the request is information should be provided that enables investors to understand the company's processes, to identify, to assess, to prioritize these issues. And then finally, metrics and targets. So information that enables investors to understand its performance on these issues, including the progress towards any targets it might have announced in the previous year, or any targets it has to adopt by law or regulation. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the general requirements. So the information that's provided in S1 is material by definition. That's what you have to disclose. And we already talked about the connectivity. This information has to link with the information in the financial statements. So S1 requires these disclosures are published at the same time, as you mentioned already. However, we are aware that getting ready for this requirement and this reporting is something that will take time. So there's a relief available to allow companies to provide its first annual sustainability disclosure using the ISSB standards 6 months after the financial statements. Have a little bit extra time to pull it together. The disclosures have to accompany the financial statements and be part of the same reporting package, but we don't say where within the financial statements they should be placed, because some jurisdictions have specific requirements and we recognize those. It's important, given the standards are designed to be used around the world and thus facilitate jurisdictional specific requirements on the location of the reporting. And as I said, we'll never say something different if you have to do something in your own region, the standards allow for this provision. And a company may provide additional information on sustainability matters beyond what's in the disclosure requirements. Companies are also required to disclose comparative information where it's available. However, in the first year of reporting, where comparable information is not available, we don't expect you to conjure it up. You don't need to report comparable information in year one if it doesn't exist already. And finally, a statement of compliance is also required. Next slide, please. So for risks and opportunities beyond climate, S1 directs companies to other sources of guidance. Firstly, when identifying which risks and opportunities to report on, S1 says that consideration must be given to the SASB standards. You are required to consider whether the SASB standards are relevant for you. And these disclosures help to improve signals and minimize the noise by surfacing the most relevant and the most material information to investors and to other providers of capital. In addition, you may also consider other sources of guidance. So for example, the CDSB framework application guidance on water or biodiversity, industry best practice, or even other materials provided or supported by investors and other standard setters. After you've done that, after you've identified which risks and opportunities, you then have to think about what information do I need to disclose? Again, S1 points to the SASB standards. You shall consider these. In addition, you may also consider a number of other options, including the CDSB framework and guidance, industry best practice, other materials, but also GRI, for example, or ESRS, among others. And finally, S1 asks companies to disclose the judgments that it has made in preparing these standards, the uncertainties that affect the disclosure, and the errors that it has revealed subsequently and restated. Next slide, please. Now, one of the most frequently asked questions we get is about assurance. And it's a fair question. When information is subject to assurance, it increases confidence for everybody concerned. It helps the poor sustainability manager know that they've done the right job or they've done it well. It helps the management team and the board know that the company is doing what it needs to do and doing it properly. But it also, and importantly, helps investors and other stakeholders know that what the company is doing, it's doing it correctly in terms of disclosure. However, the ISSB is not responsible for deciding whether reports are subject to assurance. That is the role of the regulator or the policymaker in your individual jurisdiction. And it's exactly the same for the International Accounting Standards Board. The IASB is not responsible for deciding if financial statements are subject to audit. However, to ensure that the information can be relied upon, our standards have been prepared, they have been written with assurance in mind. And we're currently working with the IAASB on assurance standards. We each recognize that current practice needs to evolve to deliver assurance on ISSB-based disclosures. And some of you will probably know that the IASB has a project underway to develop an assurance standard, and a public consultation is open. I think closes on the 1st of December. And I would strongly encourage you to have a look and to submit your input. Next slide, please. Okay. So that covers the bulk of the requirements. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're trying to help, how we've designed the standards, and what we're doing to support adoption and implementation. We've tried to find a balance between the costs for companies in applying the requirements and also ensuring investors are provided with consistent, comparable, and verifiable information. So where possible, you'll see when you read the standards, the language and the terminology is familiar. It's the same language, the same terminology as the IASB standards. Many of the requirements in S1 and S2 are to be applied proportionally with the range of capabilities and the preparedness of companies, again, without undue cost. The standards also include guidance to help companies understand how to apply them, and they refer to multiple sources of guidance to assist on topics beyond climate, and I'll come back to this in a moment. They also allow for temporary or permanent reliefs from some of the requirements depending on the circumstances of the individual company. So, for example, a company may provide qualitative information rather than quantitative information if, for example, it doesn't have the skills, the capability, or the resources to provide that information. And we'll come back to that a little bit later. So then, just to summarize on the reliefs, for the first year of application, they include a company can limit its disclosure to climate in the year 1 and begin reporting on the other sustainability information in year 2. Companies can provide annual sustainability-related financial disclosures with their next half-year reporting, rather than at the same time as the financial statements in year 1. Companies don't need to provide disclosures about Scope 3 in year 1. They don't need to apply the GHG protocol if they've got a different methodology in place. And they don't need to provide comparable information if it doesn't exist for S1 or S2. And these reliefs are designed to enable companies prepare and put in place all of their systems and processes and get up to speed and prepare for these kinds of disclosures. Next slide, thank you. So if you're sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I haven't even started, where do I begin? There's probably 3 things we'd suggest. Firstly, look at what you've got in already. What kind of internal systems, what kind of internal processes have you got that you could repurpose? Start to identify the gaps, start to think about how you might fill those gaps. Next, look at your business and think about what risks and opportunities really affect your performance and your long-term prospects. These are the ones that investors are going to look at most. These are the ones investors are going to want to see more information. These are the ones that your peers, if they are disclosing them, your investors are going to want to know what you are doing too. And start to get familiar with the concepts of S1 and S2. Open the documents, read them, talk to your auditors. Remember, the processes and the systems you've got for your financial reporting, including the support of your auditors, are likely to be invaluable, and you will likely be able to repurpose these or build on these to help you prepare reporting for S1 and S2. So in terms of the resources that have been published so far, I'll talk a little bit more about the capacity building program later and some of what's coming. But there are a number of resources that have been published already alongside the publication of the standards. And these include a basis of conclusion for S1 and S2. And these summarize some of the considerations and discussions in developing the standards. So it's kind of background information, give you a sense of what and why things were decided on. There's an effect analysis, which describes the likely costs and benefits of applying the standards. There's a project summary, which summarizes the overall development of S1 and S2, and is a pretty good resource. And there's a feedback statement for anyone who's interested in understanding how did we go from the exposure draft to consider all of the consultation responses to finally publishing the standards in June. So in addition to these resources, be sure to look at the SASB standards. Continue to use them if you're already using them. And there's an update for the SASB standards planned for, I think it's January next year. Next slide, please. You may also, as I mentioned, want to review the CDSB framework application guidance on biodiversity and water, if it's relevant or appropriate to your company. And the integrated reporting framework provides principles-based guidance for reporting structure and content. And the IR framework can support a holistic view of the value creation process. It helps drive connectivity between the financial statements and the sustainability-related financial disclosures. Next slide, please. To finish, we're almost there. To finish, let's recap on S1. We've got some things to remember. Firstly, is the information that you're providing, is it relevant? Is it material? Has it been faithfully represented? Is it comparable, where you have information to provide to allow it to be comparable? Is it verifiable? Is it being released in a timely way? Is it understandable? Will investors be able to pick up your annual report? Will they be able to see the connectivity between the various sustainability risks and opportunities? Will they be able to piece together the connectivity between governance, strategy, risk, and metrics and targets? And will they be able to see the connectivity between the sustainability disclosures and the financial statements? Is the information reported for the same time and the same boundary? Does the disclosure cover all of the material information that investors need? And you will know what they're interested in. Is there a statement of compliance? Next slide, please. Okay, I'll pause there for a moment. Let's see if there's any burning questions. My colleagues might be able to help out as well. If there's any burning questions from the floor. If anybody's online, I'll come back to your questions at the end in the Slido tool. But if anybody's any burning questions on S1, speak now or forever hold your peace. Yep. Can we get a mic? Is there one on the table?
Yes. Thank you. My name is Ray from Bank Negara Indonesia. We are one of the SOE banks, one of the biggest banks in Indonesia. So my question is one of the statements that you mentioned that when we have already disclosed our reports, we can, if there is an error of informations from the previous reports, we can restate it again in the next reports. What is the consequences when we want to restate our error in the previous reports? Thank you.
So the question is, I think, if something has been restated, are there consequences to that? And I suspect that's probably a decision for the national regulator. So each jurisdiction will adopt the standards. The regulator may decide to implement or provide for different scenarios. But in general, we encourage restatements of errors where they arise, and that's what happens afterwards is probably a conversation for the company and its regulator. We have another microphone here, please. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Macy. I'm from Keppel in Singapore. My question is about financial materiality. And so in some of the discussions we've had about ISSB, one of the things that we couldn't square was the fact that a lot of sustainability related risks would actually be considered financially material from an investor perspective. So just wondering what's your take on that, and any guidance for how to think of it. For example, things like health and safety, or even some types of climate risks. From a financial standpoint, they may not be financially material or considered as such. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's a question on materiality. I guess the concern is, what you have to try and anticipate is whether a risk or an opportunity, if it's not material now, if it's not financially material now, could it be in the future? Could something arise that creates a problem, different types of problems, but could that problem arise in the future and be so big that it could be financially material? And ultimately, the company will have to determine whether that's the case. Jonathan.
Oh, yeah, thank you for the question. I think the standard itself, the basis for conclusions, identifies sort of a thought process you need to go through in order to identify what type of information is material. But I just wanted to point out to the SASB standards as well that Charlotte was referring to, because they can be an incredibly useful source of guidance in order to help identify areas in a particular industry where it's been tested that the likelihood of this information being material. So I think SASB standards are intended to elicit sort of a process as well to go through the type of risks and opportunities that could be material from an investor point of view.
Okay, thank you. I know we're running over, so I'll have to engage warp speed and move on to S2. Thank you. So next slide, please. So let's start again. Quick reminder why S2 is important. In applying S2, a company identifies and discloses material information about its climate risks and opportunities. Investors need this information to understand how climate affects the company's performance, how it will affect its prospects, including its transition planning, its ability to adapt to climate change, how climate risk manifests in its value chain. We'll start with a summary of the key concepts and requirements, as with S1, for disclosures that are useful to investors. As we've said already, S2 incorporates the TCFD recommendations. S2 has to be used in accordance with S1. It requires material information to be disclosed, including physical and transition risk. It requires industry, there we go. It requires industry-specific disclosures using the SASB standards or elsewhere, and we'll come back to that in a moment. Next slide, please. For anyone who has used or who has issued a TCFD disclosure, you are well prepared for S2, but you are not compliant. S2 is broadly consistent with TCFD, but there are some key areas where further detail is required. You can see the mapping here. It shows broad alignment, broad consistency between the TCFD core elements on the left and S2. So on strategy, for example, it requires a company to refer to and consider the applicability of industry-based guidance. On risk management, it requires disclosure of more detailed information. For example, additional disclosures on the processes used to identify, to assess, to prioritize, and to monitor risks and opportunities. Additional information is also required about planned use of carbon credits linked to targets that have been set, and disclosure about the approach to target setting, how it's been set, and how the company monitors progress towards those targets. Next slide, please. Just like S1, S2 requires companies to disclose information on these 4 elements from TCFD. Some of the key requirements, however, are contained within strategy, metrics, and targets. There's more information required about the decision-making, as I mentioned, current and anticipated effects, features again, climate resilience, and then on metrics and targets, scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. We talked about the industry-based disclosures and the climate targets. We'll come back to this in a moment. Next slide. So climate-related risks and opportunities affect how the company sets its strategy and affects how it makes decisions. To help investors understand the effects of this information on the company's strategy and its decision-making, it's required to disclose information about how the company has responded to and plans to respond to climate-related risks and opportunities. And this includes how its business model is changing or how it's expected to change, whether adoption or mitigation is underway, what kind of planning is going on around it. Have there been any plans around transitioning to a lower carbon economy? And how does it actually plan to achieve its targets? Furthermore, a company is required to disclose information about the resourcing it has around these topics. And that could, for example, be how much it spends on research and development. How many people has it got employed looking at these issues? And of course, it has to report against previously announced targets where they exist. Next slide, please. So we talked earlier about current and anticipated effects, and this applies to climate. I'm actually going to come back to this a little bit later when we have some examples. But I just wanted to mention companies can use quantitative and qualitative information where, for example, you can use qualitative information where it can't separate the information or where there's high uncertainty on measurement. And the same relief applies. It's expected to disclose this information without undue cost or effort. Next slide, please. To help investors to understand climate resilience, the standard requires a company to disclose information about the implications of climate change on the organization's strategy and even its business model, its financial and operational capacity to adjust or adapt over the short and the medium and the long term. Now, S2 does not prescribe, it does not state which scenario you should use, but it does ask that you use appropriate or relevant scenarios and you provide the information about the scenarios you've used. It also asks about the assumptions you have applied to help investors understand the basis on which you disclose. S2 includes guidance on how a company can determine its approach to scenario analysis. And it also references application guidance arising or based mainly on the TCFD experience. And this, as you can see, this guidance requires measures and disclosures that are commensurate with the company and its circumstances. Next slide, please. So the application guidance, as I said, builds on the TCFD publications and resources. So for example, some of you might recognize the TCFD stages of progression, and we expect this guidance will enable companies to develop their skills and their capabilities over time through a process of learning and simply through iteration. Next slide, please. S2 requires a company to disclose its absolute scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. in accordance with the GHG protocol. And I think everyone should be familiar with what scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions are. If you're not using the protocol, the GHG protocol, if you're using a different system, then there's, as I said, there's a transition relief available in the first year. Next slide, please. So the requirement to disclose scope 3 emissions reflects the importance of providing information related to a company's value chain to more fully inform investors' understanding of the company's exposure to transition risk. That's why it's there. Scope 3 is typically 80, 90%, even more in some cases, of a company's total footprint. Disclosing scope 1 and 2 just isn't enough. A company must consider the 15 categories, as you can see. But as we said earlier, there's a 1-year transition relief, or there's a 1-year relief for providing this. Next slide, please. This summarizes the relief then on scope 3. So you don't have to do scope 3 in year 1. If you're relying on sources of information from your supply chain to determine your downstream emissions, you can use a different reporting cycle in certain circumstances. And we've got the relief there about reasonable and supportable information available at undue cost or effort. And this guidance, this guidance on scope 3 under development, and I think already published. Next slide, please. So on this scope 3 guidance, I'll just mention it briefly. I'm not going to go into detail, but we've got a measurement framework available, which helps people understand how to prioritize the different sources of data and information. So, for example, the framework acknowledges that there are trade-offs. You might want to use primary data. If it's not available, you can use proxy information. That might be more timely than some of the other information. And essentially, the framework helps lay out some of these considerations and trade-offs. But ultimately, what data is most important will depend on the company's own circumstances, as well as the data it's considering to disclose. Next slide, please. S2 requires the company to disclose climate-related targets where they have been set. You're required to disclose information about the characteristics of these targets, how they've been set, how they're reviewed, how you report against performance. You're also asked to disclose how the latest international agreements on climate change or any national agreements in place, how they have affected or influenced or informed the development of that target. Now, if you have an emissions target, you have to state whether it's gross or net. If it's net, you have to report your gross emissions. You also have to disclose what kind of offsets you plan to use to reach that target. Next slide. Okay. That's S2. How are we doing for questions on S2? That was a quick summary through S2. Has anyone got any specific questions on S2? One, yes. We have a microphone, please. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunities. My name is Harry Mulyadi from RSM. Sorry, actually, I would like to ask about the S1 first, then we go to the S2. one of the slides that shown previously, talking about the target. Is there any provisions in the IFRS? How long the target should be disclosed? Is it only 1 year, or it's gonna be minimum, say, 5 years to disclose? And the second one is in regards to the S2, if I'm not mistaken, there's a slide talking about assurability. And since these standards issued by IFRS, is it going to be the responsibility of the auditors, public accountant, to do sort of like a review of the disclosure? Normally in Indonesia, it's going to be stated in the sustainability report or the annual report. As we know, currently, the auditor's opinion only covering the financial statements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the first question was where a target has been set, how long should it be disclosed? So there's no time limit. If you have a target set, in some cases it might be a short-term target, in some cases it might be a long-term target. The requirement is that you continue to report progress until that target is reached. So you disclose annually progress against the target, no matter, it doesn't matter how long it's there. The requirement is the same. Progress against targets must be reported. The second question on assurance, I'm not sure if I caught the question correctly, but essentially the IAASB is preparing an assurance standard for these types of disclosures. How they are applied is a decision for the regulator in every country. The standards have been prepared to allow for assurance to take place, but the assurance standard and whether you need to assure them is a decision that national regulators will take. Jonathan, did you?
Thanks, Jonathan. I'm a colleague of Jonathan Lebray from the IFRS Foundation, and I look after the integrated reporting and integrated thinking work. And there are a few things that Jonathan has said, particularly in looking after S1, where he referred to the integrated reporting framework. And then in S2, he was talking about the need for companies to think about how sustainability-related risks and opportunity affect the business model and the strategy of the organization. And what I wanted to say was that what we found is that we talk about these concepts, the business model and the strategy, yet quite often when we talk to companies, there isn't a very deep understanding across the organization about what the business model and the strategy actually are. And one of the ways of often getting started to really understand your business model is applying the concept that we call integrated thinking. So that's about bringing together the heads of the different parts of the organization. So it could be sustainability, HR, finance, strategy, internal audit, etc. And actually start to think, what is your business model? And we run an exercise where we ask companies, those divisional heads, when they meet, often meeting for the first time, even though they've been preparing their reporting over many years, we ask them on half a page to write down what the business model of their organization actually is. And quite often they come back, and if there are 8 people around the table, you'll get 8 different business models. They're not running their business on an integrated basis, applying integrated thinking. So when we talk about these concepts of the strategy and the business model and using things like the integrated reporting framework, just as Jonathan was saying, you can use the SASB standards to help identify those material sustainability issues. Using these resources can really help you to think through what is your business model, what is your strategy, which can be the basis of then understanding how the sustainability-related risks and opportunities relate to that in an integrated way. So I just wanted to make that point that some of these resources that are available can also be used as we think about applying IFRS S1 and S2. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to run a little activity. It's going to be pretty easy. It's one you'll have to think about. if we could just return to the slides and go forward one. So it's a little bit of fun, but to get you thinking a little bit about what we've been talking about on risk identification. So this activity starts with a humble potato. I'm Irish, I'm from Ireland, so I know all about potatoes. Next slide, please. And it starts with a potato and ends with a crisp or a chip, whichever you call it. Next slide. Nobody likes a soggy crisp or chip. Next slide, please. However, to go from a wet potato to a dry crisp, you need heat, and lots of heat. And heat means CO2, means emissions, so carbon. Now, in this activity, we're going to explore where the main emission risk is within the overall process from farm all the way to consumption. We're looking for the main emission risk. Next slide. So where could the risk be through these stages of production? What actions could we take? What are the effects of those actions? I'll go through these briefly. So firstly, you have to find the right potato. What variety do you use? Where do you source it from? Which farmer do you want to speak to? Then you have to buy the potato. What kind of contract do you need? How many potatoes do you need? What price? Then you've got the actual process of making a chip or a crisp. What kind of machinery do you need? What kind of fuel source are you using to heat the potatoes? What kind of packaging are you using? Once you've made your chip or your crisp, you then have to transport it. You have to distribute it to the shop or to wherever it's being sold. And then finally, somebody buys it and somebody eats it. So there's lots of potential risks all the way through this production process. This is a real example. What I'm asking you to do is to think about where is the main risk. There's lots of right answers or lots of potential right answers, but in this example, there was only one one single solution. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to go through the 5 stages and help you think about it. So we're to find the right potato. Does it matter if it's organic? Does the soil quality matter? Do the food miles matter? Worker rights? Remember, we're thinking about main emission risk. Second one, the contract with the farmer for the supply of potato matters. It's a hint here. This one matters. Pricing policy, potato storage, the process of making the chip. How much energy do you need? The packaging, the efficiency of your equipment, your machinery, what kind of waste is involved, and then the process of actually frying the spuds. Obviously, you're going to have trucks to transport your products. You need to help your drivers understand and plan an efficient route. You've got warehouse conditions for your product. And then at the end, you've got your consumer to think about. Now, is anybody feeling brave? Is anybody willing to suggest where the main risk might be? There's no wrong answer. Lots of potential material issues here, potential material risks. Is anybody willing to put their hand up and make a suggestion where the main one might be? We're looking for the main emission risk in the process of making a chip. Yeah. Thank you for volunteering. Thank you for being the first one.
Thank you. My name is Martinez from Surabaya, Indonesia. For my perspective, the main risk in the land use change.
Land use, okay. Good point, yeah. That is potentially material, absolutely. Anyone else? Okay. Oh, yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Denny from Garuda, Indonesia. Since we're in the transportation business, I would think that probably something that would be a risk would be in the trucks and fuelings
Yeah,
aspect of it.
Yeah.
So
definitely a strong potential material risk there. Yeah, table 12, please, if you could have a microphone to table 12. Thank you.
I consume the product.
The production,
Yes.
okay.
I eat the chips while watching movie inside a 21 cinema and throw away the plastic packaging
Yeah.
into the bin or else. And all the waste goes there to the river.
Yeah.
And goes all into the
Nice to see.
biggest,
Yeah.
I think, emissions.
Thank you. Okay, 3 very interesting, very different answers. I won't hold you in suspense any longer. Let's roll forward 1 slide. Next slide, please. Drum roll. The answer is that it was the pricing policy in this, and it was a real example. The pricing policy, because the potatoes were priced by weight. The farmer, bit cheeky, the farmer stored the potatoes in an artificially hydrated warehouse, so they absorbed more water. The potatoes were sold by weight and therefore by price. The wetter potatoes meant they had to be fried longer at a higher temperature to burn off the water and to get the chips crisp. And so the carbon or the energy to do this was much higher. Next slide, please. So what did the company do? Well, it changed the pricing policy, didn't it? It changed from weight to number. And it found that the carbon footprint of a bag of chips reduced by 7%. The cost of production went down by over $500,000. And the company was able to label the product and benefit from their improved credentials. But they didn't just stop at the pricing policy. They started to look at everything else. And so they also swapped to using more local farmers, reducing the food miles. They also trained their drivers to improve fuel efficiency. They also bought more biofuel for their vehicles. But of course, there's lots of other things they could do. And there's lots of other things that they did start doing. For example, looking at packaging, looking at waste, looking at nutritional value and so on. So it's a real example from the UK a few years ago. And it's just a way of illustrating how this actually works in practice. Next slide, please. And with that, we can have a coffee break. No chips, so I don't think.
Charlotte, I think we're good to go. Over to you. Thank you so much, everyone. Please kindly take your seat.
Okay. Thank you very much. If we could move to the next slide, please. So one of the most frequently requested things we get asked. People say, can you provide an example? can you provide a case study that I can look at and that I can copy? Because this is hard. It's hard doing something the first time. But the standards have just launched, so there are no examples to point to. Instead, because the standards rely so heavily on the TCFD framework and recommendations, we can build on and we can refer to and point to the examples that the TCFD annual report highlights. And the 6th and final TCFD report was published just last week. And there's some interesting stats in there. I'll come back to it in a second. But the TCFD reports cover the 4 key areas: governance, strategy, risk management, metrics, and targets. And if you haven't seen any of the reports, they're well worth a look. They provide really helpful examples, multiple examples for each of these 4 areas. And when you look at them all, you get a sense of what good looks like. Nobody is perfect. Nobody is standout winner. You know, it's not about appointing a winner here. It's about trying to find good examples to build on. Ultimately, you know, and this is a bit of a cliche, but ultimately, an annual report is up to an individual company to write. It's its own story to tell. And there's no difference here. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, please. So this is a graphic from the latest TCFD annual report. And I've highlighted in red the Asia Pacific region. That's how it breaks it down. And you can see here down the left side are the 4 areas: governance, strategy, risk, and metrics. And then you can see the different geographic regions on the right. And what you can see here is it's actually quite good, strong performance in the Asia Pacific region. Now, it's not perfect. There's no 100% on that chart. There's gaps there, and there's gaps to fill, and that's fine. So let's then look to the 4 areas in turn. The first one is governance, and this is an example from Toyota, the car manufacturer. Now, what's nice about this example is that it highlights 3 things, and it does it quite well. It highlights the role of the board. It highlights what it has done to inform its strategy on climate risk. And it also talks about the actions that have been taken, the decisions that have been made in that year, in the last year. And in this case, it talks about investment in a subsidiary in Toyota Green Energy. It's quite simple, but it's quite effective. It's 3 core elements here that make this a strong governance statement: the role of the board, what it has done, and the actions taken, including investments. Decision, useful information for investors. Next slide, please. Again, governance. This time we are talking about I think it's the African Rainbow Mineral Company. What's nice about this example is that there's a really clear governance structure. You can see from the ExCo down to the individual committees and departments that look after these issues. So for example, you've got the ExCo, you've got a steering committee, and then you've got this 5, 6 different committees below that, which manage these issues. I know the font, it's a bit hard to read, but it is available on the QR code on your tables. But if you look at this, what's interesting also is there's no ESG or sustainability committee. There's none at all. Instead, what they've done is integrate these issues into their existing governance structure. And they are considered alongside all the other issues, the material issues that the company considers. Next slide, please. This one then talks about risk management. And what's nice, kind of like the last one, what's nice about this one is that it shows how ESG has been integrated into their enterprise risk management system. You can see here, we've got the risk management, the enterprise risk management processes on top. We've got environment risks, and then on the right, the social and governance risks. Within environment, you've got transition and physical risks, and they talk about the various processes that they've got, which is the standard enterprise risk management content. Next slide, please. Another risk management example. What's interesting about this one is that the climate risk includes the scale of the financial impact and the urgency on the right. I know, again, apologies, it's hard to see, but on financial impact, you've got medium, small, medium, medium, small. You've also got urgency, medium, medium, high, low, low. That gives you a scale, a sense of what this looks like in terms of impact and urgency. What's also nice about this is that it includes valuations, approximate valuations of the opportunities that it has identified. Again, the details are available on the QR code on your tables. Two different risk examples, two totally different ways of presenting the same information, but both are equally valuable for investors. Next slide, please. Now, turning to metrics. This is Unilever's. Now, what's interesting about this one, you might remember a little bit earlier when we talked about S2, we talked about a relief for pulling the greenhouse gas emissions from your value chain, from your suppliers and customers, and being able to use that information even if it wasn't on the same reporting timescale. So, for example, if your financial year was January to December calendar year, and a company that you worked with had a different reporting cycle for whatever reason, you can still use that information. And Unilever have done just this. They have coterminous reporting. So, for example, note A, measured for the 12-month period ended 30th of September. And note B, measured for the 12-month period ended 30th of June. This can be done, and can be done quite simply and quite effectively. The other interesting thing about this example is that they have set out their targets, and they have split it. So scope 1, 2, 3, greenhouse gas emissions in scope of net zero target. Scope 3, greenhouse gas emissions, indirect consumer use, not subject to target. Next slide, please. Again, metrics. We see scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions reported here, disclosed quite nicely. What they've also done is they've incorporated their CDP score as part of their disclosure. Again, they're trying to demonstrate their credibility to investors. And CDP is a proxy for how a company manages its environmental performance, principally, in this case, greenhouse gas emissions related. And so the inclusion of the CDP score, because it's a B, it's a good score, helps reaffirm their progress. It gives a little bit of extra comfort to investors, knowing that this has gone through that disclosure cycle. Again, what's also interesting, what they've added extra. They've indicated what they have invested in research and development linked to climate change. You can imagine, for example, in some sectors where you've got multiple companies competing, there may be an advantage for an investor to understand how much one of those companies has been disclosing. Not because because one of its peers might be putting in more or less, but because they have established themselves as a leader in that sector by publishing this information, and they may see a benefit to that as a result. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a busy slide, and it's lots of colors. So just allow me to take you through it. This slide is about scenario analysis. And what the company has done is they're tracking their progress against their steps that they have said they would do. These are the first two columns. They're tracking the progress against the Sustainable Development Goals in the middle, and they're tracking the progress against net zero at the end. And there's risks on the top, and there's opportunities on the bottom. And they've tried to equalize it to give people a sense of what's going on. Now, the first thing to note is that all of the opportunities outweigh the risks. And the second thing is that the impacts of those opportunities also outweighs the impacts of the risks. Next slide, please. There we go. There's a few examples, and there's loads more in the TCFD report, the status report. It's the last one, published last week. Definitely encourage you to take a look. Okay, next we're going to talk a little bit about the capacity building program that I support, as well as some of the other activities and next steps that the foundation is working on and that the ISSB is working on. Next slide, please. So within capacity building, there's four kind of main areas that we're working on. The first one is simply awareness raising and stakeholder outreach. You know, much as the four of us are here today to do, much like that. And many of us have been traveling around meeting many of you over the last few months, and that will continue. In addition, we've got a partnership framework. I'll come back to that in a second. We're developing high quality resources and educational materials. I'll come back to that in a moment as well. And we're preparing tailored training engagement programs for some of our key audiences. I'll talk about that again in a moment. Next slide, please. So the partnership framework was launched last year at COP27. And we now have 35 global partners signed up to help us support preparers, support investors, and others to get started. We are trying to reach all audiences as best we can, but we do recognize there's a specific need to consider the circumstances and the needs of those in emerging and developing economies. And what we're trying to do is focus on enabling consistent and comparable high quality disclosures, no matter where you are around the world. Next slide, please. These are some of our partners, including those within our partnership framework, as well as some of our other donors and supporters. And we're incredibly grateful for all of their support, their guidance, their investment, and all the help that they continue to provide us. Next slide, please. So within capacity building, we are working on creating, as I said, high quality education resources and materials. So in addition to what was published when the standards were launched, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, There was accompanying guidance, there was a basis of conclusions, there was a project report and some other materials. In addition to what was published in June, we're currently developing what's known as a knowledge hub, which will showcase good practice. Eventually, it'll include case studies. It'll showcase guidance, materials, and those of which have been prepared by us, our partners, and third parties. And we are also working on an e-learning portal, which will include learning for specific roles. For example, the role of the accountant, the role of the sustainability manager, and others. Has anyone, just a show of hands, has anybody seen or heard of the TCFD Knowledge Hub? No, a couple of hands, yeah. So the idea is quite similar. The TCFD Knowledge Hub was built by CDSB, which rolled into the foundation when the board was created, and we're building on that experience and the SASB Knowledge Hub to develop a new knowledge hub, which I'll talk about in a second. And further guidance is under development and will be launched shortly. I'll come back to that in a moment. Next slide, please. There is a lot of interest on our knowledge hub. This is a sneaky peek of roughly what it will look like. It's currently in development. It will be launched very soon. And the idea is that we provide a central platform for preparers. As a preparer, looking at scenario analysis, looking at greenhouse gas emissions, inevitably you turn to Google or whatever search engine you use, and you find a million things, and you have to sift through it all to figure out what you need. What we're trying to do is curate content that we believe will be helpful for preparers. It will be freely available. It will be accessible via the Knowledge Hub website, and it's designed just for preparers to help them get started. It'll be completely free, be open access, and the e-learning will follow in a few months' time. Next slide, please. Now, we will have around 100 resources on the Knowledge Hub when it launches in a few weeks' time. And they cover a range of topics, as you can see on the screen. I'll maybe just point out 4 which could be of interest. The first one is defining undue cost and effort. The second one will focus on greenhouse gas emissions, materiality, and scenario analysis. So these are the themes that are quite popular. We know as a result of a survey we've had on the website for a few months. These are the things that people keep asking us about. So even though they're beyond the scope of our standards, we understand that extra support and guidance is required. And that's why we're trying to pull all this together to create this resource for preparers. Next slide, please. In terms of then the tailored training, so in addition to the e-learning we're developing ourselves, which will focus on people getting started, so may have very limited background or knowledge or understanding of these issues. We are also working with partners, including the Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative, on creating learning materials for stock exchanges and their members. Today, in a few hours' time, at the World Investment Forum, our colleague Xingdong Hua and SSE, the Sustainable Stock Exchange, will formally announce a new training program that we have developed with the Sustainable Stock Exchange, and will be piloted by the Singapore Stock Exchange in November here, before launching for everyone early in the new year. We're also working with IOSCO to support their own capacity building program on sustainable finance. We've held 2 pretty big workshops, one in Egypt last year, one in Kuala Lumpur earlier this year. And as you might expect, we're working quite closely with CDP, who will incorporate S2 in the disclosure platform for next year. And we're also working with GRI to help establish a plan of action. Next slide, please. So we talked about what we launched in the summer. We've talked about some of the initiatives that we're currently working on. There are additionally a number of deliverables, a number of resources we're currently preparing, which will be launched shortly. And they include an updated FSA credential course. This is aimed at advanced users. We're preparing tips for getting started. We're presenting a number of transition guides. So for those of you who are familiar or who already report against TCFD, against SASB, using the IR framework, these transition guides are currently in development. And we're working with other stakeholders on interoperability guides for other disclosure standards. And as I mentioned a little earlier, we are developing an FAQ bank. As I said, we collect all the questions we get at conferences and workshops, and we put together answers, and that will be published shortly. Next slide, please. So in terms of looking ahead, we're committed to working a project between the IASB and the ISSB on connectivity. There's work ongoing with interoperability with jurisdictions on disclosure standards, principally ESRS. We heard a little bit earlier about the digital taxonomy. That's ongoing, and I already talked about the capacity building activities, and Jonathan a little bit earlier talked about regulatory adoption. The work on the SASB standards update is nearing completion. That'll go live, I think, in January. In terms of future priorities, if we just go to the next slide, some of you might have seen we ran a consultation for the last couple of months, a public consultation to identify the priorities for our next areas of focus. And these 4 options included biodiversity, ecosystems and ecosystem services, included human capital, human rights, and integration in reporting. I think we got over 400 comments as a result of that consultation, and those results are currently being digested, and we'll announce that in due course. Next slide, please. You are all preparers. I would encourage you to get involved in this process, either formally or informally. We heard a little bit earlier about the various groups that exist, and of course, you're welcome to participate in our own proceedings. We genuinely welcome and value your views on all of the activities that we run, and we try our best to tailor our content and our programs to respond to your needs. Next slide, please. Okay. I'm going to stop talking now for a few minutes. We're going to do something a little bit different. So we've got a game to play in the room. For those of you who are online, we have a different way for you to do it. So you don't need to leave, but appreciate it might not work as nicely. I'm going to ask my colleagues to pass around. If you could just go to the next slide, please. I'm going to ask my colleagues to bring around one blue box of cards to each table. Has anybody played this game? I know some of you have been at some of our events before. It's okay. So we have a game here to play, and it's designed to bring to life some of the decision making and thinking around risk and managing risk. And I'm gonna let colleagues bring the box around to each table, and we have instructions to follow, and I'll help you through it. So the overall objective of this game, or this activity, is to identify and address climate risks that might impact a business. This is a role play. You have to imagine yourself as a business, as you're all preparers. That's easy, and we'll follow the scenarios, the instructions, and we'll work our way through it. It is scored, so at the end there will be a winner, depending on the score. Now, if you're joining remotely, excuse me, if you're joining remotely, if you go to the link on the slides, if you type in that address, it's tcfdhub.org/climate-game. If you scroll down to the bottom of the page, click the blue button, you'll open up a PDF which has instructions and the cards on the game. You play it in exactly the same way. Okay, let's give it a second. Okay, right. The first task of every table in the room is to appoint a chairperson, a leader, or a chair is appropriate. The chair of the board needs to be chosen at each table. So could you appoint a chairperson at each table, please? Don't worry, the chairperson won't have anything to do, just as normal. They don't do very much. And there's no difference here. Okay. Has every table picked a chairperson? Could the chairperson take the box, and open it, and within it, you will find a little leaflet, an instruction leaflet. Okay. Now, the first task of the chairperson is to appoint a resilience manager. So could the chairperson please appoint a resilience manager for each table? Okay. Right, we're going to do this in stages. So the chairperson now, having appointed a resilience manager, needs to open the pack of cards and find the blue cards first. There are 6 company types, and you can just pick any of them. It doesn't matter which, but don't look at any of the other cards. So open up the pack, pick a blue company, pick any of one of the 6 cards for a blue company. There's automotive, there's chemical, there's agriculture, there's energy. Has everyone got their company? Yeah. Okay. When you've chosen your blue card, your company card, put the other 5 cards in the box. You don't need them. Okay. Okay, has everyone got their company? Yeah. Let me just take a back to one, just need one. Okay, once you have identified your company, you need to look at the risk cards. They're the turquoise cards. You need to review all of these risks and decide what is most material for your company. You prioritize 6 cards, 6 risks. Review all of the risks and decide which are the material ones for your company. And we'll give you 10 minutes to do this. If anybody is in trouble or they need some extra help, just raise your hand. I'll wander around and I'll help. Okay, everyone seems to be doing quite well, reviewing the risks. For anyone who's joining remotely, this is something you can do on your computer screen. If you're reviewing the PDF, the risks are lettered alphabetically, and you should be reviewing each of them and deciding which are most material for your company. If anybody needs some help, just raise your hand.
Yeah, this is transfer risk, transition risk.
When you have identified your risks, your 6 most important risks, just stop there. Don't continue. You have them? Excellent. Okay, so just hang on. So once you have your risks, you just hang on. You don't need to do any more. You okay? So that's fine, that's fine.
We have 6.
Okay. Oh, you're on to action. You can just wait for a minute. We'll get onto the actions in a minute. Yeah.
Okay, so where's the chair?
How are we
Pick
doing?
6,
Okay.
risks.
6, yeah. You have it?
5.
You have 5.
6 already.
Okay.
6.
You okay?
Once you have prioritized, we have 2 risks. Maybe the
If you're not able to decide on the 6 risks, then your chairperson gets to dictate what they should be. So you should try and find the 6 risks But if you can't decide on the last one, your chairperson can decide on behalf of the group.
Okay. Choose 6
Okay,
actions
yeah.
only.
You just wait, yeah? When you have your 6 risks identified, please just wait.
There are 6 risks, okay? So this here, E, C, D, let's pick a range. Very nice, huh? Very good. Oh, based on risk now. Okay. This is the most important regulation. New regulation, need for new technology, and then this is market demand, and then
Oh, now, hang on with the actions. You don't need to do the actions yet. Just wait with the risks. Not yet. That's not yet. So wait for the actions. Just stick with the risks. Yeah. Okay.
part-time treasurer, part-time.
Okay. It looks like most people have got the risks. If you can't make a final decision on the last risk, your chairperson can decide. But I think we have a few groups who are ready to move on.
Full-time lazy boss.
Okay, so if you have your 6 risks, you can now pick up the green cards. These are the action cards. These are how you mitigate the risks.
I think it's very important.
You should review each of the action cards and decide how best to map them to the risks that you've got. Yeah. As you review the actions, you can only pick 6. You can only choose 6 action cards. So you have to choose carefully. The 6 action cards have to address all of the risks. Some of them will address more than one risk. So you have to choose carefully which action cards best minimize or mitigate all of the risks that you've got. If anybody needs some help, just raise your hand. Okay, so 6 risks, and 6 risks, and then 6 actions. Okay. You have your risks? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Who's the chairperson? Oh, okay. It's time to make a decision. Yeah. You can now review your actions and figure out which ones support those risks. Yeah. 6 green cards. You should be reviewing them and you should try and match them to your risks. Okay, looks like most people have got it. So you need to review the green cards, review the actions, and you need to decide which ones to prioritize for each of your risks. Okay. Don't go near the red cards, not yet. If you have your 6 risks, if you have your 6 actions, please stop. Oh, no, no. Don't pick up the red cards. If you have your 6 green actions and your 6 risks, just wait. Just wait. Not everybody is finished yet. Okay. So if you're watching remotely, you should have your 6 risks. You should have your 6 actions. Yeah. Just wait. Yeah. Don't pick up the red cards. Okay, 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes to finalize your actions. Some tables are complete and they're waiting. Very good. Okay. How are we doing? You have it? What is it? No, don't look at those. Don't look at the red cards. Just wait, just wait. Yeah. Okay, 1 more minute. Can I have those? I'll take the pack. Just the pack, yeah. Okay, we have, I don't know if it's eagerness or cheating, but the stock exchanges might be interested. People have been picking up the red cards. So if you have got your 6 risks, if you have got your 6 actions, I would like you to pick up the event cards, the red cards. I would like you to shuffle these cards, please. Shuffle them. Shuffle red cards. And I would like the chairperson on each group to randomly take out 6 event cards. Don't look. You're cheating if you look. 6 random event cards. Okay? Shuffle the red cards. Don't look. The chairperson can take them out. I'll just take them. So on the back of the event cards, you will see some numbers. You'll see some green numbers. If you have chosen wisely, some of the actions you have taken will have minimized the risk. So if you, for example, if you have a 1 or a 2 or a 3 on the back of the event card, that means you get a point per number that you have, because you have chosen actions to minimize the risks. Something has happened and you have been prepared or not. So for every number you have on the back of your risk card, award yourselves a point. Yeah, 1 point. Yeah. 1 point. That's it. If you've got, yeah, if none of the other numbers are on the back of the card, then only 1 point.
It's not here.
Okay. No. So that's fine. Yeah. No points. That's. So you're looking for these numbers in your cards that you've chosen. Yeah, so you have number 2, you get a point. Yeah. So if you find a number on the back of your red card, if you find a number and you have that card, you get a point. Okay? Yeah, you add up the numbers. Add up points. So if you okay? No, no resilience. No.
11, 14, 15, 5 points.
Okay, how are we doing? 4. Okay, so you just count up the number of points you have.
Yes.
Yeah. So 1 point per number.
1 per number.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, just add it up. Yeah. How are we doing? Only three? Okay, so you can get more than 1 point if you have more than one card. So if you have 1, 2, 6, or 16, you get a point for each of these. And what about these? None of these? No? Oh dear, not very resilient. No. Yep. So if you have any of the... So one number was 1 point. So if you have... if 15 comes up twice there, you get it. You get it 2 points. So some of these will work for more than one. So 15 and 15, so you get 2 points. So, okay, if you have 6 here and 6 there, it's 2 points. Because it comes up twice. Yes, yes, yes. 4. So if you have 6, 2. So if you have 6 here, and you have 6 down there, that's 2 points. If you have 8 here, that's 2. So every time you see one of these numbers, if they matches between cards, you get an extra point. You just add them up. Okay, how are we doing? Okay. Okay.
If you already picked
Yeah, you turn them over. Yeah, yeah. So if you have 5, then you get a point. It's 1 point. If you have 2 points. Yeah. Yeah, 2 points. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Just keep going. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So if yes. Yes. It's 1 point for 12. Yeah. If you have 12 somewhere else, you get 2 points. 1 point each.
We have 4 able to counter these events.
Yeah.
4 points.
Exactly. Yeah. And these numbers you don't have?
Yeah, we have 8.
Yeah.
We have 4.
Yeah.
And then we have 4. So the point is total 4.
You just add them all up. Yeah. You add them up. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Not very resilient. Not very resilient. I know. Yeah. Yeah. It's random. It's random. It's random. And these numbers you don't have. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's it. All right. How are we doing? You got your score? Okay. Okay. How are we doing here? You got your score? Very good. Okay. Okay, so what you need to do here, for every number you can see that you have, you add a point. So for example, 4. So you have 16.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
You have 12, 15, 16.
3, 5, 6, 1.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. How are we doing here? Agriculture, yeah? Yeah. Yeah. The events. Okay. And see, have you added your score? No. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So if you have 5, that's 1 point. 6 here is 1 point, and 16 2 points, and you can 16 3 points. So every number you see here, you get a point for. 1 point. So 1. Can't see, sorry. 16 2. That's, and then no. There's another one. For 1. 6. You have 6, yeah. And 16, that's another one. And then 10, there we go. 1, 12, 13. Yeah. Yeah. 6. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Have you added up your scores? 6. Okay. Thank you. Okay, I think we're nearly there. So you need to check your scores. So if you have any of these numbers here, then you get a point. If you have, so here we go, 4, that's there. You get 1 point. 2 points. Oh no, sorry. No 1. 4 is there, that's 1 point. 16. 1 point. Yeah? 15, 3 points. 7, yeah, another point. That's an extra point. 8, another point. No. Okay. Okay, how are we doing? You got your, have you score? Not yet. Okay. Yeah, 1 sec. You got it? Okay, so if you have any of these numbers on your green cards, then you get a point. So 10, 1 point for 10, another point for 13, that's 2, there's 3, that's 3 points. 4, and you just keep adding them up. Yeah. Okay. So there's another one. 11. Yeah. 5. And just keep counting. Yes. Okay. How to add? So. 13. How did you get? Okay, show me. So if you have 1, you get 1 point. Okay. If you have 4, there it's 2 points. 5, 3 points. Where's the others? That's another point. Yeah. Do you have any of the other numbers? 8. There's another point. So every time you see a green number, if you have the card, it's 1 point. Okay? Yep. Okay. Okay, well, that's not bad. That's okay. That's okay. Okay, how are we doing here? Have you got your... Have you done your events? Oh, you have a score? Okay, okay. I'll come back to you. What was it? Very good. Okay. I think we're nearly there. Two more questions, yeah? Yeah? So if you have 2 here, and you have 2 here, there's 2 points. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to do well. Yeah, yeah. Yes, it's random. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. That's very good. Yeah, that's okay. It's good. Yeah. Yeah. That's okay. The reflection is perfect. Thank you. Okay. So for every time you see one of these numbers on your cards, if you have them here, it's 1 point. So let's see. 3 is 1 point. That's 2 points. 10 is another point. 10, another point. Yeah, so just count them all up, okay? Okay, there's a lot of tables. A lot of tables have got their scores. And at the back of the pack, no, sorry, it's the orange card. At the back. There we go. So if you have a number, if you have completed the activity and you have got your score, there's a reflection card. And I would like the chair of each table to run through the reflection activity. There's a couple of tables who are yet to finish, and we'll allow them to finish. And then we're going to go around and see who is resilient and who is not. So if the chairs could pick out the orange reflection card and just lead the group through that activity. Thank you. Okay, 2 more minutes, and then we're going to go around the tables and see the scores. Okay, 2 more minutes. Is everybody happy with their scoring? Does anyone need any help with the scoring? If you got a low number, that doesn't need help. So every time you see one of these green numbers here, you give yourself a score, 1 point. So for example, this 1, so that's 1 point. Oh, you must have more. No, not 6. So 3. You got no cards that score more than once. Please. Sorry. 6. Yeah. That's tough luck, isn't it? Okay, who's the chair? You're walking home. Okay. I'd like all the chairs at the tables to have their number ready. And we're going to call out each of the tables in turn. And we'll see who's resilient and who's not. So, ladies and gentlemen, can we start with table number 1, please? And if we could have a microphone. Yeah. So table number 1, who's your chair? You don't need to give your affiliation, but if you can just tell us your name and tell us your score, please. And just check the mic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello. What's your name?
My name is Jordan. Yeah.
What
We have
what
played
was
the
your
card
score?
And we choose the retail company. The score is 8.
8.
Yeah.
8 is the
Parti-
score to beat.
yeah.
Okay.
Partially resilient.
Well done.
Yeah.
Thank you. Table number 2.
Yes.
Yep. What's your name and your score, please?
Can I just give my score but not my name? We scored 5 points.
5 points. Good
Yes, sir.
effort. Well done.
Good effort.
Good
That's it.
effort.
Thank you.
Table number 3, please.
We scored 9, which I think it's
Ooh, 9 points.
pretty good.
9 points.
And I should say that it was actually the regulator sitting with us in the room that picked the best risks and actions. So thank you very much.
Excellent.
And of course, I should congratulate our
Well, let's see. Don't.
Chief Resilience Officer as well.
You're not done yet. Okay. Table number 4, please. If we could just get a mic. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, for table number 4, our resilience score is 6.
6. Well done.
Well, it's the lowest.
Table number 5.
Our score is 11.
11. Ooh. Very good. 11. Table number, 5 here.
Table number 5. We have a score of 4.
4. Okay. Well done. Well done. Table number 6, please.
We try twice. For the first time, we got 5, and the second time, we got 8.
Twice. I don't know. I've never seen that before. Okay. Table number 7, please.
We got 9.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
9. Solid. Well done. Table number 8, please.
Okay. We're from no number table. Our score is 5.
5. No shame in 5. It's okay. Next table, please. Well, let's come back. I think they're still deciding. Can we move on to table number 9, please? And we'll come back to 8. Thank you. Hello, table number 9, please. Yep.
We got 7 points.
7 points. Well done. Thank you. Next table, please. Can we move the mic?
Okay. We are from 10th clap. And we get, unfortunately, we get 6 points.
Well done. 6 points. Well done. Next table, please. Sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
From the table 11, our point is 9.
9. Well done. Good score. Next table, please.
Hi, we are table 12. Our score is 10.
10 points. Well done. Excellent. Next table.
Our score was 6.
6. Well done. Thank you. Next table.
We got 11.
11. Well done. Well done. That's 2 11s.
We're from table 15. We're very proud to announce that we got 3 points.
3 points. That's definitely a contender for the wooden spoon. Well done. Not resilient at all. Next table, please.
Hi, we're from table 16. Our point is 6.
6. Well done. Thank you. Next table.
So we got mining company and we got 13 points.
13. Wow. Wow. Okay. Very good.
We choose agriculture and we got 7.
7 points. Well done. Next table.
Thank you. As a chairman, we are Indonesia. We are pro to local farmers. And especially during the pandemic, the local farmers is really impacted to the price of the fertilizers that imported. So our strategy really impacted towards the impact, our cost strategy. And then regarding to that issue, that our strategy is using the strategy internally. We cannot afford to do the for the cost, the expert, chatter the issue for NGO or chatter the issue of the customers. So it's really impacted to our score is only 4. So
well done.
Within this big opportunity, we invite the international funding to help our local farmers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have one table left, I think, here in the middle. I think, is it one more table in the middle?
And the last.
Yeah.
Our score is 11.
11. Wow. Okay. Well done. So normally at this point, the table with the lowest scores starts complaining about the game. They say it's unrealistic. It's too difficult. And all the times we've played this game, you can see the score goes up quite high. But actually, if you've got double digits, you've done really, really well. So congratulations for everybody who scored 10 and above. And I think the winners are got a score of 13. Isn't that right? At the back, table 17. Thank you. As a reward, you can get you can take the pack home with you. Each of you can take a pack of cards home and play with your friends and family and colleagues. So, and can I just run to the next slide, please? I just want to thank everybody for running through that activity. It's a bit of fun. It's a nice way to bring some of this material to life. If anybody, I know we're almost out of time. If anybody has questions, and we can see if some of them there on the slides. I probably don't have too much time to do answers, but I promise we will put those answers together for you afterwards. And if anyone has any questions in the room, please find me or my colleagues afterwards. Can I just run back to the final slide, please? Can we turn back to the slide? And next slide. I'd like to just finish with a simple thank you. Thank you in the room for staying with us all the way through and for your participation in the game. It's a little bit of fun. I'd like to say thank you to everybody still with us online. I'd like to thank our hosts for having us here today. And I'd also like to thank the MC and all the technicians and everybody who made this production possible. We really appreciate your support. Thank you for having us. I'm going to hand back to our chairperson, to our MC. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles. Let's once more give a round of applause to all of us. Yes, thank you very much. Now, we will have a closing remarks by Head of Issuer and Public Company Supervision Department of OJK. Please welcome Ms. Novira Indria Ningrum.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to greet first board member of the International Sustainability Standard Board, Mr. Bing Leng, Head of Delegates Monetary Authority of Singapore, Ms. Abigail Ang, all speakers from ISSB, Jonathan Bravo, Jonathan Lebre, and Jalrad Molloy, all participants, both in person and in virtual. Ladies and gentlemen, as we might aware, a significant issue that many investors and stakeholders facing today is that in contrast to financial data, investors and stakeholders lack access to high quality, internationally comparable sustainability information. Therefore, the ISSB development will fundamentally alter how sustainability reporting is done around the world. I believe every item covered today is extremely important and relevant to the action that should be taken by companies, regulators, and other related stakeholders in post-launching of the ISSB standard. As Charlotte explained to us, the ISSB will support adoption standard, including through adoption guidelines, transitional relief, and capacity building activities. The speakers provided us with insightful conversation and discussion on topics pertaining to sustainability reporting, the significance of disclosures, and various strategies to aid in the adoption process. It was also quite interesting to hear the participant viewpoints on the advantage and difficulties of applying the ISSB standards for corporate reporting, as well as also their suggestion on how to overcome such difficulties. Before I wrap up my remarks, I would like to thank everyone who has contributed to make this event possible. On behalf of OJK and ACMF members, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to ISSB as joint host of this event and for its continued collaboration with the ACMF, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, as the chair of ACMF Working Group A on disclosures, and also to all ACMF members who have helped to make this training a great success. Thank you for the support from the Sustainable Finance Institute Asia, SEVIA, Asian Development Bank, and Asian Secretariat. Thank you also to ACMF Secretariat and OJK teams, my teams. Last but not least, I would like to thank all participants for joining us today. I hope this event benefited to you and your institution. Enjoy the remainder of your day. I hope you have some time to take in Bali's natural beauty, and we wish you have a wonderful trip and get back to your home and your country safely. Thank you.
Thank you, Bu Novira, for the closing remarks. I was informed that we will have another photo shoots with everyone in this room. So please kindly stand up, and then we will have the photographer on the stage. All participants, please do stand up. Thank you. As we will have a photo sessions with all of you in this room. Probably you can move closer to the center of the room. Okay, please move closer to center. Yes. Okay. Make sure you can see yourself in the screen. That way you can assure that you're in the photo. Okay, I think could you please move a little bit to the center part? Yes. Okay, is it good? All right, let me count. 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more freestyle. Give the best smile, everyone. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Yes. Thank you so much. With that, our training session has concluded. Thank you so much for your active participation today. Enjoy the rest of your day in the beautiful island, Bali. Thank you so much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Santi Santi Om. Bikin aja.